OK, super. Et bonsoir. Bienvenue à la clinique Football 101, session numéro 2, organisée par les Reines Football avec le support technique de Football Québec, que je souhaite chaudement remercier pour leur aide. Ce soir, nous avons la chance d'avoir coach Sean Murphy, entraîneur-chef de l'équipe féminine de football contact à Ottawa, les Capital Rebels. Si vous avez des questions pendant la session, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans le chat ou à lever la main dans Zoom. C'est une session interactive, donc on a besoin de votre feedback. Welcome to the Football 101 Clinic Session 2, which is a progression from the first one. This is hosted by Les Reines in collaboration with Football Quebec. So we have Coach Sean Murphy tonight that will present. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them in the chat or raise your hand in the Zoom application. So, sans plus de délai, je cède la parole à Sean.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Bonsoir, merci. Thanks for being here. So we will continue on from where we were, and just share my screen in a moment here. Okay. Right, so where we left off last was that we had just described the basic offensive and defensive positions. Just bear with me here. I'm trying to get this to come up as a slideshow. Hold on. Okay. So just let me, Adrian, just let me know if everyone can see the screen.
So far, we see a black screen. Oh, and now we see your presentation aspect.
Okay. Is it large enough or?
Do you have two screens? Maybe you can share the other screen.
I do. Just bear with me 1 second here. Sorry, bear with me, everyone. Okay, how's that?
That's perfect.
Looks
okay,
good.
Perfect. Okay, sorry, it's because I had a second screen hooked up there and it was taking it. Okay, so one of the things that we had talked about was the offensive and defensive positions. So just a very quick review again. So we have an offense, we have our 5 main core line, which begins with the center who snaps the ball, 2 guards on either end, and then 2 tackles. And then we have usually and we'll go through this in a moment in terms of balance and unbalanced sets in offense. But we usually have 4 receivers, quarterback, 2 running backs, what we would call a balanced formation. So I want to talk about on offense, how we describe a formation, and as well from a defensive point of view, how we would identify that formation. Okay. So for example, the formation we have here is what's called a 3-by-2 ace. Okay. And again, terminology is something that can change from coach to coach, team to team. So nothing is set in stone, but these are typical words and terminology that are used in football. Okay. So again, if you hear something different and you're unsure, it doesn't make it wrong. It just means that it's something different. Okay. So again, in this picture, you'll see that we're showing on this side of the field is wider, which we learned that the terminology for that is called the field, And the short side or weak side, as a lot of people refer to, is called the boundary side, okay? So when we're calling a formation, especially when we're a defense, we always want to call the field side first. So in this scenario, if we have 1, 2, 3, so they brought, say, in an extra receiver, or they brought, say, a running back out from the backfield. So when you see that, we would always call to the field. So we would call the 3 receiver set. So 3 by 2 on the boundary side. All right. And then we would call ace being a single back. Okay. So that is terminology. And then with the quarterback, in Canadian football right now, the trend is definitely that your quarterback is rarely under center, if at all. So you'll see it a little more in the NFL. But typically they will be back, 3 to 5-ish yards, let's say, depending on the depth that coach wants, in the backfield with the running back beside him. So what we would call that is either shotgun or pistol. So depending, again, terminology can change from team to team, coach to coach, but this is what we would call. So if we had a quarterback that was not under center, we would call a 3 by 2 shotgun or pistol ace. Okay. So then if we're looking, just going to change slides here. Sorry, my slide is not reacting here. Hang on. Sorry, I just got to stop sharing for a moment here. Something was weird with my. Oh, okay, sorry about this, guys. For some reason, my slideshow does not want to change screens.
You just had it just before.
Yeah, but it wasn't allowing me to go from my next slide. That's why, sorry. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show an example just on a video here of a CFL game, just to give you an idea of I apologize, everybody. My computer is not doing what it wants me to do tonight. Okay, here we go. So this is a game that was Saskatchewan against Ottawa. Just going to fast forward a little tiny bit. Okay, so here is an example. Can everybody see the screen? Yes?
Yes, all good.
Okay, perfect. So we see here on the right side of the screen, okay, that this is the offense. So we see here, if you go to, the way I do it is I always start counting like how many players are on the line if I'm trying to determine how, what is a formation, right? So if I here, it's kind of hard to see exactly how many, like, do they have a tight end in there? Do they not? So sometimes when you're looking on film like this, or even live, if you can't quite see, I always count in the opposite direction too. So for example, we've got 1 receiver, 2, 3, 4. And then we have a running back 5, quarterback 6, and no receivers over here. So if we have 6 and we have 12, that means that we have now 6 on the line, which means they have a tight end. Okay, so kind of some easy ways, depending on how your brain works. You can, if you can clearly see the line, you can start counting the line, and then you can start counting off your receivers to see what formation they're in. So in this case here, we clearly have the wider side of the field, which is the field, and we have the boundary, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 receivers, right? So now what we would call that is a 4x0. Well, actually, we did have one here. So it was a 4x1, excuse me. Okay, so my mistake. So it was even, so we only have 5 linemen. So it was a 4x1 shotgun ace. Okay, so again, 4 to the field, 1 to the boundary in a shotgun or pistol, whatever you want to call it, and an ace backfield. Okay, does that make sense to everybody in terms of how we're calling that? So again, the easy way to look at that in the flip, let's just say that over here was the boundary. Okay, and there were 4 receivers to the boundary. We would actually call that a 1x4 shotgun ace. Okay, so always call the first numbers to the field. Okay, because it's, again, it's helping reinforce the idea that that's where the strength is of the field, right? Okay, and again, we see our 5 line. Now going defensively, when we were talking about certain positions, again, we see in here, they have 4 down line. So now we're looking at a 40 front. So when we had talked about how to identify a defensive front, so you've got your 40, okay? And again, it can be any number of linebackers in there, depending. When they've got an ace, you might bring in an extra defensive back, or you might keep in an agile linebacker. That's all stuff that we'll cover in other sessions with some of the other coaches. But these are just, you know, in terms of saying like this is a 40 front, that's what you would see, is that you have those 4 down line players. Okay. Just stop sharing that for a moment. Okay. I wish in all these platforms you could flip easily from screen to screen when you're sharing, but apparently you can't. Okay, so in here, we want to talk also about how we would identify a running play. Okay, so we've identified it like a passing scenario. So we can have, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios in your formations. You can have 2x2, which would be 2 receivers, and then that would leave, you know, 2 running backs in the backfield with your quarterback, or you can have 3x1, 3x2, 4x1, or again, if we're going to the field and they brought, you know, fewer receivers, you can have a 1x4, a 1x3, a 2x3, a 2x2. So all those different combinations. So then we move in terms of how would we identify if we're running? And again, I can't stress enough that every coach will have a different playbook and different terminology and different things, but this is the very, very basics of what we want to look at, okay? So what I like to do is I like to number our holes, okay? Keeping all of the even numbers to the right side of our line and the odd numbers to the left. And here's why. So let's say, for example, I wanted to call a play that went right here in between the guard and the tackle. Okay, that's the 4 hole. Okay, we know that that is to our offensive right. And so let's say we want to give the ball to the running back who we've identified as the 3 back. So I would simply identify that play as a 34. Okay, so 3 back getting the ball through to the 4 hole. So now, and again, this will be things that we can go through later on down the road, but now we identify who gets to block who on the offensive line based on where the ball is going to go. What hole is the ball going to go, right? So again, if we wanted something like the exact same play, but we wanted the 2 back to get the ball, well, then we would call it a 24, okay? So then if we flip to the reverse side, let's say we wanted to go a little bit off the edge of the tackle here, an off tackle play, and we want to go to the 7 hole, and we were going to get the quarterback to keep the ball. Well, we could call that a 17. Okay. So just some basic ways of being able to identify where you're running the ball and who's going to get the ball. Okay. And again, some people will call plays very, very differently. When you get into the pros or even the university level, obviously their plays are very, very complex and they may not call it as basic as this. But this is a good way for anyone to start out when you're, especially if we're talking about Les Reines, trying to build a league, you're going to have a lot of new teams, a lot of new players. So you want to introduce some more basic concepts to say, okay, this is how we're going to run the ball, and this is the basics of it, right? Any questions on that? No? Okay, so here's an example, all right, of, again, a 34, and what we would call this is a 34 lead, because we have a lead blocker, okay? So we would have a 2x2, all right, so two receivers, so we'd have a 2x2, and then we're running the 3 back to the 4 hole with a lead blocker. So we would call this a 2x2 34 lead, okay? So again, you can see that any combination of those things would work fine.
I have a question.
Yes, absolutely.
If you call the play that right there, you call a lead, right? Can the quarterback change and decide to give it to the other running back instead? So
now you're starting to get into a little more complex stuff where you have an option for the quarterback, right? So absolutely you can. You can have it so that there are certain reads. So everybody has heard about read option, or RPO is something that I think was in one of your first sessions that was introduced. So RPO really means it's run pass option is what RPO stands for. And again, there are certain reads, and I'll explain basically in case they didn't explain very well on RPO. I wasn't at the session, but RPO usually is predicated and determined based on you leave one free defensive player coming in unblocked, and whatever they do is what determines whether the ball carrier gets the ball or the quarterback keeps the ball. So for example, the quarterback will always put the ball in the stomach of the running back and let the running back sort of, they call it riding the ball. So they'll ride the ball by, a few steps, and the quarterback's eyes are on the player they've left unblocked. So let's just say, for example, it was a defensive end out here, okay? So if that defensive end crashes in very, very hard, then the quarterback will pull the ball and roll out, and they have the option, again, of either running or passing the ball at that point, okay? But what happens is that it gives them extra time by having that defensive player. If they crash in hard, then obviously they're going to roll out here, and they have a little bit of space to make a decision, okay? If that defensive player bubbles out because they want to contain that quarterback, then they would probably hand the ball off, and it would leave some sort of a gap free somewhere in there where that defensive end bubbled out, okay? So this, again, is where you have options off of your play calling, okay? I would, again, my opinion, it'll change from coach to coach. In my opinion, start off with the very basics of learning how to run to a specific hole with the specific ball carrier. And when you've perfected that, you've run it 100 times and you can execute it very well, then you can move on to the next level of having an option in there or things like that. And again, that's just my personal opinion. It may change from coach to coach. So hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions on that, or on, I sort of went into RPO there a little, but if you have questions on RPO, we can address that as well. No? Okay.
How do you count? How do you stop the RPO? It sounds complicated.
How do you stop RPO? So a lot of times is that you have to have a very patient defensive player who is going to not quite stay in what I call no man's land, and excuse the expression again for man in there, but what you would have is the player who's unblocked would come in, be a little more patient to let that play develop before they go. So if they crash hard, they're giving up the outside. If they bubble, they're giving out the inside, as I mentioned. So if you kind of get them to sort of be patient and continue aggressively towards the ball, but stay kind of in that middle, it really sort of doesn't give them the true option that they want. Okay. Now that's a very basic way of combating it. Obviously, there's a lot more complex stuff that I'm sure, again, in some of the other sessions we can go into, but that is a basic way of stopping RPO. And the other thing too is being what's called gap responsible. So if we go back to when we were identifying the different gaps, let me just go back here. Just bear with me here.
Yeah, it's about setting the edge.
It is for sure, yes. And so again, I don't want to go ahead and use terminology, but thank you for using that term, setting the edge, and that's really what it is, right? So that unblocked player sets the edge, and then from there, they're limiting the options that they have in that RPO, right? So if we look back in just a very basic 4-3 defense and everybody's gap responsibilities, if everybody's very gap sound, then we're going to eliminate, everything that they have as an option, right? So again, if we leave like this outside player, whether it's an end or a linebacker, who, if they come in and they stay firm and set that edge, they don't go too wide, they don't crash, then really, what can that quarterback do? At that point, now it becomes almost an athlete against athlete. Is if that quarterback keeps the ball, he's going to try to beat with speed to the outside against that player who set the edge, right? Or if they hand the ball off, they're hoping that somewhere along the line here, somebody was not gap responsible, okay? Now, obviously that can happen because, you may have a double team, or you may just have an offensive lineman who's having a better day against a defensive line. So there's different things that can occur there. So for sure, it's not always an automatic win for the defense just because you set the edge, right?
No, absolutely. I remember when we were playing it, every offense in the whole league were only playing RPOs, and the way we defended it was we forced the decision. So all we did was hit the quarterback every play possible because he's faking it, so it's legal to hit him in the mouth. And then the RPO, for some reason, after the second quarter, they weren't doing RPOs anymore because the quarterbacks were getting hit.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing too, is that no quarterback likes to get hit, even a mobile quarterback. They don't really like to get hit. So as much as you can hit them, the better. So if you look back, I don't want to go too off course here, but if you look back at the old fashioned true option football, right, where the quarterback purposely rolls out and they've got a running back kind of about 2 to 3 yards off to their side and maybe a yard back, and they're going to see, is the defensive player committing to the quarterback? If so, they're pitching the ball off to the running back. If not, they're going to run with it. And so any team that I've ever faced over 27 years of coaching, it's always like, we never get a free chance to take a shot at a quarterback, so take the shot. Right? Quarterback wants to hold on to the ball, take the shot, make them pay, right?
Yeah, we'll take every chance we get.
Absolutely. And so that's generally the philosophy defensively, is that you say, hey, you want to put your star player out there and let them take hits. I don't even I even coach it to the point that even when they toss the ball on the option, you're still laying a shot on the quarterback, right? So I know that doesn't sound nice, but that's the way it goes.
It's legal.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll flip back again a little bit defensively, and I'm jumping back and forth offense to defense just because I just want to keep some fresh ideas. So hopefully you don't think that I'm all over the place, but I just want to jump back and forth from offense to defense just to keep it a little bit fresh. So when we talk defense, and I talked about canceling gaps or being gap responsible, one of the biggest things in there is that everybody has to take their job very seriously in a gap elimination or gap cancellation. Okay, if we have somebody who decides to go what I call rogue, like they decide, I'm going to go and just do my own thing on this play, offensive coordinators will see that. They will see that someone's not being responsible in their gaps, and they will expose it, and they will run off a big play against you. So my thing is, if you Google this, go back and Google the Baltimore Ravens back when they won a Super Bowl, and they had a guy named Tony Siragusa as their nose tackle. Now nose tackles are pretty much his size all the time, but he was a rare kind of guy. He had some good speed off the ball. He was, anywhere depending on the year, but he was between 340 to 360 pounds. Some say he even got up to 400. He was a big guy. He basically eliminated two gaps because he was so big. So he would always take a double team. So two players had to block him in order for any offense to have success. But he was so good that he would still make plays even though he was double teamed. And if he didn't make plays, he had a guy that some of you may have heard of called Ray Lewis behind him. All right. So how can you go wrong when you have a guy who takes two players on and then allows his star linebacker and a Hall of Fame player in Ray Lewis not be blocked at all and be free to make tackles? So this is what I always say to players, is that sometimes you have a role on a team and you may not like the role. So if you're being asked, hey, you're going to take a double team all day against this team today, if that's our game plan, because we're going to allow this linebacker to go and make plays one-on-one against that running back, we feel it's a good matchup. So, it might suck and you say, okay, hey, I'm not going to get any stats, no recognition. I'm not going to hear my name on the PA, won't make any tackles. But the point is this is what makes it such a great team game, okay, is that everyone has a role, everyone has responsibilities, and if we do them, we win collectively as a team, okay? So that's one thing.
I have a quick question for you,
yes.
Sean. You talk about double team.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we covered that exactly, but what is a double team?
A double team. So yes, so a double team is simply that. It is 2-on-1, doubling on one. So a lot of offenses go on that basic premise. When you're running very basic running plays, you're always going to do what's called doubling down at the point of attack. And what that means is you're going to create a double team at the point where you want to run the ball. And again, offensive and defensive philosophies change, and some coaches may not use that, but the very basic teachings of football is that you want to double down at the point of attack. Okay. So for example, if we have a defensive tackle and you have a guard and an offensive tackle, you may get them to both block that single defensive tackle and then run directly behind them in that hole. Okay. So maybe I'll just go back here. Hang on. And I have a slide for that, just bear with me. Okay, so we'll use this. So again, let's say we wanted to run, again, the 3 back into the 4 hole. So if you remember, we had even numbers over here. We had 2, 4, 6, 8 out here. All right, on defense, we call those our gaps, A, B, C, and D. So people like to make jokes about poor defensive players, and say they're not smart enough to memorize numbers, so we have to give them letters, right? We know that's not true, right? Defensive players. So again, if I'm running the 3 back in the 4 hole, I may want to do something like this. I may want to double team with this tackle and this guard on this defensive tackle. That would leave this defensive end free. Now, depending on what responsibility this defensive end has, if they constantly go outside to do what's called contain, is get the outside, they're going to leave a gap there, and if we double team here, it leaves now this linebacker. 2 good things can happen here. If we don't have a lead block, now we have what I call Bob. Bob means backer on backer, B-O-B, backer on backer, Bob. So we've got a running back against a linebacker. So you see where we get back on back, Bob. Okay. So worst case scenario, if I don't have that lead blocker, I have linebacker against running back. I have Bob. Now I just hope that my athlete beats their athlete. Okay. If I have the lead, and this end goes outside, now I've got a lead blocker comes and knocks him through. Now I have an even better scenario for Bob. Now I have either a halfback, a defensive back who's smaller, or a free safety who's smaller than a linebacker or a D line. And now they're trying to make a tackle against one of my best athletes in my running back. Okay. So that's the basic premise of a double team, is that we want to, at the point of attack where we're running the ball, we want to attempt to have a double team. Okay. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things that I'm sure Sam will get into when he does his session, where you actually do what's called climbing up to the second level. So we call the line of scrimmage the first level. We call the linebackers the second level, and then we call defensive backs the third level. So if you can get a blocker, either a running back or an offensive line, to climb to the second level, you're going to gain a lot of yards all the time. Okay, if you can achieve that, getting to the second level, if you can get to the third level as blocker, even better. Okay, so when you get that ability to climb to the second level, that's really good. So in a double team, for example, let's say again with the example I gave, where this tackle and this guard double team this defensive tackle. Let's say that this Mike linebacker sees that the play is coming to that 4 hole and starts coming right here to try and fill that hole and make a play. Well, at this point, this defensive tackle can now, once they know that the block is secured against this defensive tackle, they can now do what's called chipping off. Okay, so that's a term that you'll hear Sam possibly talk about, is chipping off. And they chip off of this lineman and go up to the second level and block a linebacker, or even third level of DB if they can. Okay, so you get your double team that happens, and then they will chip off and go. So what I'm going to do is, Adrian, if you can make note of some of this stuff we're talking about, and you and I can talk after, and then I'll pull up video that I can send to everybody of examples of what a double team looks like, what a chip off looks like. I didn't want to get into that video today, but I think it would be good to see for people after the fact so that they can see what that is. Okay. Any questions on that? So probably a couple of new terms that you've never heard, right? So possibly not hearing chipping off, possibly not hearing double team, probably not hearing the word bob, okay, backer on backer, right? So these are all good things. So I'm glad we brought them up. Okay. Just bear with me. I was talking about one specific thing that I was going to get to about defense. Talking about flow, sorry, and gaps. Bear with me. I can't find my slide where I was there with that. Okay, so when we look again at our defense, and everybody's got gap responsibility, okay, you'll notice that on a couple of players on the defense, I've got like dotted lines, okay? These dotted lines represent the fact that they are flowing. So I don't know if you've heard that term before, flowing to the play. Simply what flowing means is that as the play develops, and a play starts moving in a certain direction, so whether it goes to the field, to the boundary, up the middle, the play is, everyone starts flowing towards the ball, right? And so it's important that you maintain your gap while still flowing to the play, okay? And what I mean by that is, say, for example, the running back, so we've got a 3-back, again, going to that 4-hole, same example. So if I have this defensive tackle who's responsible for this A gap, when they go to the A gap, we don't want them to get pushed completely away from that A gap. They have to maintain that gap and stay in there. And then once they get their eyes in the backfield, they would identify where the ball is going to and then flow to that. So although I've got an arrow here that shows he's going to that specific spot, so it means that that player is responsible for that gap, and then they have to flow. So similarly, if the play started going way to the outside, they would control their gap, make sure that nobody's coming into their gap, and then flow to the play, okay? Same with a Mike linebacker. In this scenario here, they're responsible for that boundary, field side, A gap. So they would take their, what's called a read step, and a read step is simply that you're reading what's happening on the play. So you want to read what the offensive line is doing, where the ball is going. But then I've got dotted lines going in either direction because then they have to flow. Okay, so Mike linebacker needs to be able to flow what's called sideline to sideline, right? So if the play was running way out to the field side here, then Mike would take their read step inside, make sure their gap is sound, and then they would flow to the play. Okay, so hopefully flow makes sense. Okay. Going to talk about some defensive coverages. Okay, so there are a million coverages out there, and you'll hear a lot of American ones as well. So we got to be careful that we're not Googling American coverages. So basic ones that I'll cover right now are cover 3 and cover 1. Okay. Cover 3 is basically zone, where you're watching an area, and I'll get more into that in a minute. Cover 1 is known as, and again, je m'excuse pour les noms, it's man to man. Okay, so tonight we'll call it woman to woman coverage. Okay, so cover 1, woman to woman coverage. And here is the example that I like to give players, and it's kind of funny, but it makes it stick in your brain. Okay, simply means that you cover that player no matter what. And my example is this: if they go for a shit, you go for a shit. I even had one coach that told me, which I put in here, he says, if they go for a shit, you wipe their ass. And I'm sorry, Football Quebec, you might have to bleep out some stuff, but this is man to man, right? Or woman to woman coverage. This is wherever they go, you're going. Okay. So cover 3 is basically, again, like I said, you're in a zone or you're watching at a specific area. Okay. Cover 3, when we hear the word cover 3, it means that there are always 3 players that are covering the deep part of the field, and they split the field in 3. Okay, so each player has 1/3 of the field, and I'll show an example of that in a moment. Okay. I'll come back to this to reinforce this, but I'll just cover it for a minute. So in zone coverage, there's something that I call watching grass, which I don't like seeing, and I see it even in the pros sometimes, and it drives me insane. So you get somebody who goes to a zone and they figure, okay, I'm watching my zone, coach. I did my job. I watched my area, but they didn't try to see if there's nobody who comes into your area, then you're watching grass. You're not watching a player. You're watching grass. So what use are you to anybody if you're just watching grass? So part of that, and I'll get into this concept in a minute, is that we want to do what's called close windows. Okay. On an offense, when they see us settle as a defense into our specific areas, our zones, they will go and find an opening in those zones. And that's where the receiver will settle in order to be open for the quarterback to throw to. Okay. So we call that an open window. On defense, we want to close that window. Okay. And again, I'm going to go into that more specifically, but I just wanted to touch on it for a minute. There are 2 basic cover 3s. And again, these will be called different things by different people. I like to call them cover 3 cut and cover 3 hold. Okay. And I'm going to tell you a reason why in a moment, why I like to call it cut and hold. Okay. Just like my example of Bob, backer on backer. Cut and hold have specific reasons why they start with the letter C and the letter H, and I'll show that in a minute. Okay. So here's an example of cover 3 hold. Okay. So again, the cover 3 portion is that we have 3 players that are covering a deep cover, and they are covering 1/3 of the field, right? So this corner, it's coming back in their zone. They cover 1/3 of the field. The free safety is covering 1/3 of the field, and the other side corner is covering 1/3 of the field. Okay. The halfbacks on either side are going into what we call the flats. Okay. And the flats are when you run what's called a flat route, it's usually a out pattern or an in pattern or something like that. So that's why we call it the flats. Okay. Now, why do I call this specific one hold? And I'll show you cut quickly and come back to it. Cut is simply that the corner now is in the flats and the halfback goes deep. So hold, halfback in flats, cut, corner in flats. So this is where I make a joke with my players. I said, I developed a stutter the other day. So when I say to you, hold is the halfback in the flats, and cut is the corner in the flats. Okay, so it makes everybody laugh, but it's going to stick in your head that now you know hold. When coach stutters, it means that, oh, I'm the halfback, I'm going to the flats. Cut, when coach stutters, the corner is going to the flat. Okay, so just an easy little trick to remember that. Okay. So now what do our defensive line and our linebackers, do in a cover three, right? Hold or cut, typically their jobs don't change in terms of their zone, but I won't go into this just yet, but what they're looking for in terms of the types of pass progression plays that are happening, they'll have different keys depending on whether we're in hold or cut. Okay, I'll touch on that in a moment. So again, if we look at Will and Sam, they are in what's called the hook and curl zone. Okay, so hook and curl zone. And the Mike or Mac, however you want to call them, is got the middle and what we call crossing routes. Okay, so if a receiver comes and crosses over the field, that's where Mike is going to look. Okay, in here, hook and curl is kind of those shallower, short, inside the hash mark type of plays, right? Now, I'll say this, I'm not going to get into it, but we can maybe get into it another time, is that defensive line players are also allowed to drop into coverage too. So this is where you'll hear a term maybe called like drop coverage or exchange. You might hear that as well too, where the linebacker and the D-line exchange responsibilities. So the linebacker would rush in and the defensive line would drop back. Really all that is it's creating troubles for the offense so that they have to think about who they're blocking. So if I'm lined up and I'm a defensive line player and I'm just always coming, trying to get to the quarterback, then it makes it easy for that offensive line to say, okay, I got to pick up that player and every time they're coming. But now if all of a sudden I were to bring, say, this Will linebacker and walk them up and put them right on the line, now this tackle has to think, well, who's coming? Are they both coming? Is it the defensive line coming? Is it the linebacker coming? And it makes them hesitate for that split second, right? To think. And if we can get them to hesitate for that split second, then we'll win that battle. Okay. So that is the basics of cover three. So I'll pause there for a minute and I'll open it up for some questions because I'm sure there may be some questions on cover three. Anything?
Cover three, the main go-to zone coverage on a Canadian football field?
Absolutely. On a Canadian football, cover three will be the main cover. In American, you will see cover two being it, again, because they have the one less player. So typically they don't have that fifth defensive back like we do. So being 11 players in American, you'll oftentimes see cover two. Personally, not a fan of cover two. It works, but it's just not one of my favorite things. But yes, cover three in Canadian football will definitely be the standard in terms of zone. You'll hear a whole bunch of other terminology. You'll hear box play or match cover or things like that. And really what those are is, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's more experienced offline about these coverages. But really what those coverages are is you're making decisions based on what the offense is providing you with their route combinations. So everybody has a responsibility. I'll review it super quick. Let's say match play, for example. The halfback in a match play is always going to read from 2 to 1, and their responsibility in basic match play is the first in, second out in that order. So if this player runs an in pattern, they are responsible for it. If this player runs an out, and then this player also runs an out, so they're first in, first out, excuse me, not second out. So first in, first out in that order, right? So there's decision making that gets into those types of coverages. And again, I don't want to go too much into that. And then also, even I'm giving you a very basic description of match. It gets far more complex than that. But that's sort of the basics of it.
Last question. Is it possible to play, let's say, the zone coverage on one side of the ball, and on the other side we could play man-to-man? Is it just a possibility?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So I like to call that, this is just me again, I like to give names to things that make players laugh and also make players remember. So I call that pizza coverage, because it's a combination, right? So, hey, I'm going to order the combo tonight from my favorite pizza place, right? So I always call that a pizza coverage. So absolutely, you could have zone to one side and man to the other, especially once you get into, I'm showing here this in a balance formation, a 2x2 formation. Once you get into imbalance formations, if you get a 3x1, for example, if you have a stud corner who can cover one-on-one, then hey, why not go zone over here on the 3 and go one-on-one over here. Now, that's obviously what some offenses want. They want to exploit that and say, okay, hey, put your best woman against our best woman and see who wins, right? So absolutely, you can go combination coverages, or like I said, I like to call them pizza coverages. So for sure, you can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
I don't know if you covered that, but how deep do the people that drop have to go in cover 3?
Okay, very good question. And I'm going to give you a vague answer. It depends. So when we have our 3 players who are in cover 3, their responsibility is that nothing should get behind them. Okay. So they have to be as deep as the deepest route. And that's why I say it depends. If these, let's just keep it to this side of the field. If the Z receiver runs like a 5-yard out, and the Y receiver runs like a 10-yard hook or curl, then the corner doesn't need to drop like 30 yards back, right? Or 20 yards, or whatever. They can hang out there and help. And I'll answer your second question before coming back to that, because that's where we get into closing windows. Because if that corner has nobody who's truly threatening them deep, they're going to support their linebacker and their halfback in those other coverage, in those other routes, and they're going to close the windows on those receivers. Okay, so I'll come back to that. Don't let me forget that. I'll answer your second question now.
Sounds good. The second question was about, you said this is showing a balance, and we're diving maybe a little further with this question, but do you allow the defense to adjust if they were to overload one side, and then automatically you would tell your corner, your man-to-man or women-to-women on that side, and the rest is zone for a basic play call, and then the adjustments? Absolutely.
There are always in-game adjustments, and this comes with your game plan. So every coach will have a different game plan. So if the coach's game plan is to switch to, if they go 3x1, that they'll move into a pizza coverage, or maybe they'll rotate the safety over to like the hash so that they're covering. They might bump out the Sam linebacker a little bit. It all depends on your defensive philosophy as to what you want to do. And again, I can't definitively give you a single answer on that, because there's a million ways to do that. And if I were to give you one answer, I would be wrong, because there's so many ways to do that. But typically, you will either look at the safety or the Sam bumping out. And again, it depends on the athlete that you're leaving out on that island alone. If it's 3x1, now do you want to leave that? Are you comfortable with that matchup right there, one-on-one? In some cases, when teams go 3x1 and that's their best athlete, I would actually bring my free safety over to help the corner, and I would bump my safety to maybe cover or not my safety, but my SAM here, maybe to cover a little deeper or something like that, right? So again, it all depends on your personnel against their personnel and what your philosophy is. So hopefully that helps. I could get into more complex stuff, like if they go 3x2, what we do, and if they go empty backfield, if they go 3x3, they go 4x2, they go. There's a lot of other things that I could really go into, but for now, I think I'll keep that simple. And then anybody who wants to talk, so I'm a DB at heart, so anybody who wants to talk DB offline, just call me and we'll talk for hours.
That is perfect. Thanks, Sean. And I wanted to highlight how how many options there could be for defense. It's a more like a organic feel. There's still a game plan, but just for the new players to get a sense that defense is, you go with the flow a little more still with
for sure. And I will say that offensively as well too, right? So offensively, you're going to there if you have a really good offense and a good offensive coordinator, they're going to have a game plan that takes what the defense gives you, right? So sometimes it means being more patient. So if you're a team that likes to throw the ball deep all the time and you're not getting those plays, then you've got to be able to adapt on the fly, and you've got to take what they're going to give you. So if they're going to give you like 3-4 yards at a time, and maybe you can get what's called yak yards, so yards after the catch. If you can get 2-3 yards after the catch every time, then now you're gaining slowly, right? So it all depends on both sides of the ball have to adapt for sure. And this is why I love football, because it's a giant chess game, right? I make my move, what's your counter move, and then what's my counter move to your counter move, right? This is why I love the game. So before I go and talk about, sorry?
Yep, we have approximately 8 minutes. So
okay. So I'll finish off on just talking about windows and closing the windows, because I think this is the important last part to cover 3, and then we can stop, okay? So again, if I give the example, say that this Y receiver runs just past the where the halfback's going in the flats and runs, say, to about right here, okay? And then let's say this Z receiver runs inside a little bit like that underneath, okay? So at this point, it's about reading, okay? So your halfback will always read from the inside out. So they will always, if there was a third or fourth receiver, they're always reading. So I number them 4, 3, 2, 1. So a halfback would always read 4, 3, 2, 1 and see what routes they're running. So as you drop back in your zone a little bit and then head to your zone, you're reading the routes to see what they're doing, okay? Because if I don't have to run all the way out to the flats because nobody's running a pattern there, then why would I do that? I'm just running out there, wasting energy, and I'm going to watch grass. So I wouldn't want to do that. I want to read the routes. So if I see, for example, this player going behind me, I'm going to let that go, because once it's past me, it's a deeper route and the corner should pick it up. But as I read this receiver, if this receiver comes inside, I'm going to close that, okay? Same as Will. At this point, if Will doesn't see any of the running backs come out of the backfield and threaten his zone or her zone, all right, they will close the window towards their first threat, okay? So again, if that Z receiver is running an inside route right here, the halfback's going to pick it up and Will is going to pick it up, and they create a double team. So now we're talking, before we were talking about offensive double teams, now we're talking about creating a defensive double team. So the idea for me behind cover 3 is that I always want to end up with one double team somewhere on the field, okay? So if I'm taking that example, Y comes out, the corner, that will be their deep threat. So the corner will pick up that player. And then similarly, the free safety, if the free safety has nobody from this side of the field that's threatened their deep zone, they're going to decide to close a window. Now, free safety a little bit better. They're different, that at that point, they might be looking at the quarterback's eyes, and they may close a window towards the quarterback's eyes or to where the quarterback is looking to throw. We won't talk about quarterback lookoffs or anything now. We'll leave the quarterback guys talk about that. But again, if we can create even another double team and close the window this way, then we're good. So ultimately, we want to close windows vertically, so up and down the field, and horizontally across the field, okay? And like I said, if we create a double team somewhere all the time, then we're gold, Okay. Again, the key is don't watch grass. If you hang back in your zone and you look around and you're all by yourself, find a player from the opposing team and close that window. Okay. Now, here's the nice thing about what do you do when you close that window? I always say at that point, you've converted yourself to a cover one or woman to woman cover person. Once you close the window and you figured out that that person was your threat to your zone, or that you closed a window into another zone, that you now are cover one on that player. Okay, so if I give that example again, where the Z receiver kind of ran that little bit of the Y receiver ran kind of a little bit of a deep out or a deep hook and curl here. When the corner sees that the Z receiver hasn't threatened vertically, that the Z receiver has jumped in shallow, they are now going to close the window on that Y receiver and it becomes cover one in there. Okay, so if that receiver settles into trying to be open and they're not open and then they start going deep again or something, then the corner is going to go with them. Okay. So again, it's all about reading what is your first threat to your zone. Okay. So I'll stop there and I'll open it up for questions because there may be questions on that for sure. None? You guys are all cover three experts now? I love it. It's amazing.
Taking it in.
it is a lot to take in. And I maybe just like kind of a show of hands. Has anybody had cover three described to them that way before? You can just, put a thumbs up in the chat so Andrian can see or something like. No, all thumbs down. Nobody's yes. Some people. Okay, well, Football Quebec. Of course. I hope you've had cover three described to you like this. Okay, so I hope that's a good thing. I hope that's something to learn, and we can review it, and I'll dig up. So now that we're going through some of these concepts, I'll start digging up film as well for some of our next sessions, so that we can actually see this stuff happening live. Okay, we can see what a cover three looks like, and it's hard to get pro film on it because they're always running different types of combinations of coverages, and they run a lot of match or a lot of different things, and offenses always give them 3x2s or 3x1s or things like that, so there's never ever simple formations. But okay, I think that's it. I think I'll stop there for tonight. It leaves us 2 minutes for any questions, or we can just head on our way.
So if anybody has a question, now's the time regarding today's session, or something you would like to clarify from a previous session. Also, Coach Sean will do that.
Tout le monde est gêné.
Zoom is not easy.
No, I know. Okay, that's great. And again, I'll leave it open if you want to address questions after the fact, if you think about them later, or if you have an aha moment, I call them, where you go, oh, and you have a question, then feel free to submit those in and we'll answer them.
Yes, and I think that wraps it up. Everything we covered today is well noted, and we will send the links via Facebook and via your emails to complement the information. Next Wednesday is quarterback and receiver, so that may also answer some of your questions. And otherwise, the next session with Sean is the next Monday. So thanks again, everybody, for attending, for learning the great game of football, and we hope to see you soon. Merci à tout le monde.
Merci tout le monde. Merci.
Québec,
Thank
Sean,
you, Sean.
everybody.
Bye.
Merci.